tracking the pulse of the road and the future of flight. From viral trends to policy shifts, we cut through the traffic to bring you the stories that drive us. Your fast-track guide to everything on the move starts right now. From the Billionaire News Channel studio to Mellow 947 BFM, your playlist made better. I'm Paolo del Rosario. This is Shift Habits. Now, as the Philippines steps into a greener transport future, the shift to electric and hybrid vehicles is gaining momentum. Now, with support from the government and investments from the private sector, a new kind of mobility is taking shape. Cleaner, smarter, and less reliant on traditional fuel. Now, as global and local automakers expand their electric lineups, the need for innovation in auto parts is also picking up speed. Mitsubishi just announced plans to produce a hybrid vehicle at its Santa Rosa plant, a big step forward in the country's electric mobility journey. Now, behind every vehicle is a network of local parts manufacturers, quietly powering the industry from the ground up. Now, from battery parts to electronic systems, these companies play a key role in supporting the shift to electric mobility. Now, as the industry continues to evolve, one big question remains. How can local parts makers help drive the Philippines' electric future even further? Now, to help us break that all down and to talk about how local manufacturers can keep up with the growing demand for electric and hybrid vehicles, we are joined today by the President of the Philippine Parts Makers Association and Chairman Emeritus of the Electric Vehicle Association of the Philippines, Mr. Ferdinand Raquelsantos. Magandang hapon, Sir Ferdi, and good evening to where you are.
Good afternoon. Yes, thank you for having me on your show.
Actually, the appropriate greeting might be good afternoon, good evening, and good night for everyone watching wherever across the world. But we're going to start off first with what's happening here in the Philippines. There is now a shift to more hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and we are seeing an increase of number of the new purchases, if I'm not mistaken, for vehicles has now reached closer to 50% for the year for hybrid vehicles. When it comes to local auto parts manufacturers, are we also starting to see a shift in the production of parts for these vehicles, or are we ready to actually supply parts for these types of vehicles, sir?
Yes, actually, the parts makers composed of like 128 companies has been in the industry for quite some time, even since the early or the mid 80s. And up to now, this capacity and capability is available. And actually, although we are very dependent on the local, we call it completely knocked down assembly for us to be able to supply our parts. But again, as you know, more and more imported vehicles are in the market. And I would say for 2025, there's only 20% that is locally produced. So those 20% is what we are supplying. But again, way back in even as far as 1997, 80% of vehicle sales is locally assembled. So we have more components that we are supplying. That's why we are really excited to have electric vehicles. Well, particularly for Mitsubishi, they are planning to do hybrid electric vehicles in the Philippines so that we can have an increase in local CKD assembly.
Well, that actually brings up a great point, sir. You mentioned Mitsubishi having a commitment to have a dedicated production line in its Santa Rosa, Laguna plant. How does that actually factor in to the local production of parts, especially for electric and hybrid technologies?
Like I mentioned, like last year, out of 508,000 plus vehicle sales, only about 100,000 is locally produced. So this, of course, is from Mitsubishi Mirage. Of course, Toyota has their own local assembly also of Vios, the Innova, and Tamarao. And of course, Mitsubishi has also the L300. And the total of that is only about 100,000 vehicles. So if Mitsubishi would come up with a new model, a new local assembly model, then obviously we are hoping that that 100,000 becomes plus 20% more if the local assembly comes in, and obviously a lot of shift, include especially now with the fuel prices going up. A lot of customers are shifting to electric vehicles. Of course, the hybrid is the most popular, being a lot of consumers still have this range anxiety.
Yeah.
So the hybrids becomes more sellable as opposed to the full battery electric vehicle that we call. Yes, but uh, I believe that's the very good entry point amongst the six categories of electric vehicles, having the hybrid being first.
Sir, when we look at the hybrid vehicles and the electrification of the vehicles in Manila, in the whole of the Philippines, rather, is it a challenge for local parts makers to be able to supply parts for some of these hybrid vehicles, these electrified vehicles? Because technology is a bit different compared to what we see as the ICEs.
Yes, actually, a great majority of parts maker would be still their components would still be present on an electric vehicle or even a hybrid vehicle. As you know, a hybrid still has a combustion engine besides the electric propulsion system. So, like for myself, I manufacture seatbelts. So whether it's combustion engine or electric vehicle, I can still supply my seatbelt. So the rest goes with the interiors, the plastics, the rubbers, and the metal components are still present in an electric vehicle. So I more, but if I may add, there's a greater opportunity, of course, for electronics, for semicons, and for software makers to be able to supply on this electric vehicle models.
You mentioned the opportunities, sir. So you've mentioned a segment of the market, or rather the production line, that probably has not have had as much focus when it comes to actually being part of this entire ecosystem. Is this the opportunity for local parts makers to take advantage of yung mga semiconductors, yung mga software, and so on?
Yes, actually, this is a gateway for them. I believe even that some of the infrastructure, like this charging stations or charging systems, our local semicon or electronics industry has been supplying their own components to China. So when they assemble those charging units in China, most of those parts are coming from the Philippines. So now, if there's going to be a local assembly here of hybrids or electric vehicles, then they can directly get their components locally.
Is there a challenge, sir, in terms of transitioning to servicing more EV vehicles when it comes to traditional auto parts makers here in the Philippines who normally service only ICE vehicles? When it comes to expanding their range, what would be the biggest stumbling blocks into be able to servicing electrified vehicles?
Actually, servicing electric vehicles is a lot less as far as repair works or maintenance is concerned, because again, on a combustion engine, you have like 4,500 component parts, whereas in an electric vehicle, you probably have something like 1,200 parts. So a lot less parts that you have to maintain or repair. And again, most of the repairs or maintenance that is being done on whether it's full electric or hybrid or plug-in hybrids, they're all done through software. In fact, you don't have to bring your vehicle to the service center. You just have to call, and then you plug in your laptop to to your vehicle, and right there, your diagnostics can be all read, and the service personnel on the other line would just have to tell you or even fix the system through the software. So it's very simple.
Are there enough experts, technicians, for those who actually can work on these particular EV specific problems, especially the mga electronics, mga software? Do we have enough people here in the Philippines, from your experience po and from those who are actually, your conversations with those servicing EVs, to actually accommodate the growth that we are seeing right now? Or is there still a lack of personnel?
Actually, for the last 18 or 19 years that our Electric Vehicle Association has been working on. We've been tying up with TESDA for training and even for schools, for the academe, specifically for Mapua and LaSalle. We've been constantly providing technology. Also, in fact, there are some bachelor's degree already being offered now for electric vehicle maintenance and technicians. Also, a lot of the distributors of electric vehicles in the Philippines do provide their own principals, technology and training for their local personnel. So I believe we have enough technicians in fixing or attending to electric vehicles and even hybrids.
Sir, we're also seeing a lot of brands that are starting to grow in the Philippine market. We see brands like BYD, Geely, VinFast, and so on, rising in terms of the vehicles that they are selling. And a lot of them are because they are EVs, they are hybrids. Is this going to be a problem for after sales when you're talking about the parts available to try and service these, considering that these are brands that have been here, to be completely fair, but the amount of vehicles that we're seeing on the road for these brands are starting to grow, and some people are worried about potential shortage of some of the parts for these certain brands?
Actually, the basic parts, like let's say the under chassis
Yes.
components, which is common for both ICE or internal combustion engine and electric vehicles, they're basically the same. So the component parts of those items are readily available. I would say the most critical would be the batteries and the electric motor on the electric vehicles. But again, technology is very fast now. We've been using a lot of lithium-ion batteries for the common brands that is in the market. But I know the solid-state battery is coming in. And I know there are some models already introducing the use of solid state, and it's going to be like 60-70% cheaper in terms of the battery cost. And later on, if you need to replace your battery, which I think is going to be like after 12 or 13 years, when you're using the vehicle, then the replacement cost of the battery is going to be very cheap. And as you mentioned about the resale value of the vehicle, I think the value is still going to be there. I would imagine it's going to be a lot better than the resale value of combustion engine. But again, the reason why is because you don't really have the maintenance. Like you don't have to have the tune up. You don't have to worry about change oil.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about even the refrigerant on your radiator,
Yeah.
because all of those is not present in an electric vehicle. So except of course for hybrid. That's why sometimes when you really assess, um, there's pros and cons on having hybrids as opposed to full electric batteries, or even the one in between, which is the plug-in hybrids.
Yeah. You know, sir, we can go on and on about that. In fact, we will, but after a short break. So please stay with us. We'll be right back in a short moment. Welcome back. You're still watching Shift Happens. We're going to continue right where we left off. We're still joined by the President of the Philippine Parts Makers Association and Chairman Emeritus of the Electric Vehicle Association of the Philippines, Mr. Ferdinand Raquelsantos, joining us live via Zoom from all across the world. Sir Ferdi, once again, we really appreciate you being here. I want to talk about the batteries in particular. Arguably, the most important part of a hybrid vehicle, of an EV vehicle, electrified vehicle. And some people are worried about, one, the safety concerns, especially when you get into an accident, if and when, hopefully not, knock on wood. And at the same time, yung resale value po nito, because some people are saying that the battery does degrade to a point where in the resale value, when you compare it to an ICE vehicle, an ICE vehicle rather, is going to be, well, not quite at the same level. Are these myths, or are there things that are being addressed already when it comes to these concerns?
Actually, on the average, I've seen, because I've been driving an electric vehicle for the last 6 years. And basically, the battery that we have right now in the market has 5,000 cycles. That means 5,000 charges. So if on what the brand distributor are saying is, your battery would last for about 12 years. But in our application in the Philippines, because we don't really have to travel a lot, because like let's say from Muntinlupa to Makati, that's only like 12, 13 kilometers. And you normally have like a full battery electric vehicle has like 450 kilometer range. So like myself, I charge only the most once a week.
Yeah.
So if I divide my 5,000 with the number of charges that I do, my battery would last 18 to 20 years. So of course the battery would degrade, but again, I would imagine that if you resell your vehicle, like what most brands would provide guarantee or warranty of 7 years on the battery, I believe those battery can still last a lot longer than 12 years. So again, of course, the state of battery would be or your resale value would depends on how much battery life you still has. So I believe again, because of low maintenance, I would imagine later on people would really realize that the resale value of electric vehicles will be a lot better than combustion engine.
When we talk about the safety, sir, because that is still a big concern, especially if you get into an accident. Again, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't happen to anyone watching the show. When there is a collision, there is concern that the battery would be damaged, would be dangerous for, would be even more dangerous compared to an ICE. What would you say to those who have that particular concern, especially since that it has been documented that has been an issue with certain batteries of certain brands?
Yes, I've seen a lot of videos and tapes on when a vehicle gets into an accident, or even before when during charging, sometimes the battery overheats. But that is the old generation of batteries. The batteries that we have right now is what you call this, well protected. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, the new solid state battery doesn't even burst and goes into flame, not like with the lithium ion batteries. So there's a lot of development, and I would say yes, for the current models that we have in the market, there are chances of if there's a puncture on the battery casing, it could, of course, it could have it could burst, and there's gonna be a flame. And normally with the batteries, we call it thermal runaway, which means even though you keep on washing, pouring water, it's still gonna burn,
Yeah.
right? But I know a lot of new models now. The protection on the battery casing is very good, and less chances of puncture. Again, of course, if you drive a combustion engine, and if you get into a crash and your fuel tank, or even your fuel line is exposed to heat, then it would also burn like
Yeah,
any other car.
that's true.
Yeah.
So we're running out of time, but before we do so, before we wrap up the show, again, for those wondering, we have to focus on the batteries again because that is a integral part of the EV conversation. And when we talk about the local manufacturing of parts here in general, does the battery actually fall under the jurisdiction, or not necessarily jurisdiction, but is it something that local parts makers can service currently, or are we still dependent on imported batteries, especially for those who require new ones or would like to change their battery for whatever reason?
Actually, there's a lot of or several manufacturers of battery. If there would be a demand later on, like let's say Mitsubishi would start assembling their hybrid vehicles, then obviously the battery parts maker would be able to provide those lithium ions. Now, as far as maintenance and repair, actually, there's a lot of small, medium enterprises who do repackage batteries, meaning they import the cell, the battery cell, and then they can configure whatever size you want, 48 volts, 92 volts, and they can assemble them, and we call it repacking. So you repack a certain specs of battery size that you want.
Will there be
And that's
guaranteed safety for that, sir? Because again, it feels like one of the more integral and dangerous parts in particular. And to have something repacked, I'm sure would raise questions, or at least question marks when it comes to yung safety and integrity po ng mga bateryang ito.
Yes, of course. They're all covered with standards on their assembly, which is being followed internationally. So I would say that yes, there's confidence in as far as the safety is concerned on the local assembly of those battery packs.
Sir, before we let you go, what is your message to those who are considering EVs, hybrid vehicles as their next investment, especially for those who are concerned that the parts might be lacking or maybe the after-service care won't be as comprehensive as if they purchase an ICE vehicle instead?
As a starter, I think the number one consideration is the fuel prices right now. Just like what we were declaring before, between a diesel and an electric vehicle, it's 65% cheaper before. Now, with the prices of diesel up by like 150, 170, the difference now is 84% cheaper on having electric as opposed to diesel. So going to your question about the concern of parts, yes, the parts makers would be ready to supply all the whatever requirements for the repairs and maintenance of electric vehicles in today and in the next future.
Ladies and gentlemen, he is Ferdinand Raquelsantos, the president of the Philippine Parts Makers Association and chairman emeritus of the Electric Vehicle Association of the Philippines. We really appreciate you staying up late for us, sir, joining us from a world away. And enjoy your trip there, and hopefully we can see you live in studio very soon.
Yes, and I'm looking forward for that. And thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you, sir, Ferdi. Really appreciate you. And that concludes our roundup of the stories driving the industry forward. I'm Paolo del Rosario. Join us again tomorrow on Shift Happens, your fast-track guide to everything on the move.